The next topic that I wanted to speak about is the matter of Jewish outreach, because you have been involved in that for many decades now. If it wasn't for Jewish outreach organisations, I don't know if I'd be gone down the life path that I've gone down today, and so I'm incredibly grateful to the work they do. But and we've discussed this previously on JTV. And I think some of the issues that occur that we've discussed that surround Jewish outreach can occur in any type of organization or person that tries to influence opinion and try to bring people from point A to point B in terms of their perspective, or at least to help them to understand a different perspective. But I wanted to. We had a conversation about this off air, and I wondered if you could talk to us on air about what you think some of the key ethical issues that need to be that people involved in Jewish outreach ought to consider and have at the forefront of their mind. And I wondered if you could just sort of share with us some of those things, because I think they're really critical, and I suspect most people will resonate and agree.
Sure, and let me just say, as you did, that I myself am a product of, so to speak, of Jewish outreach, and I am massively grateful for being where I am today. The fact that there were organizations or there were individuals that were reaching out and encouraging young Jews to get involved. I come from a fairly secular background. I didn't keep kosher. I didn't keep Shabbat. I had a non-Jewish girlfriend. I'm sure I would have married out. My sister married out. So I was very disconnected from the Jewish community. And it's only because of Jewish outreach that I became involved. And really, that's what drove me to spend so much time and so much energy and so much effort over the years in Jewish outreach, because I felt very grateful. And I felt it was something I wanted to share with others. And I found two outreach organizations in this country and spent a lot of time and energy developing them and engaged in them, raising money for them and educating within them. So I have, as you say, a long history in it. However, I have felt over recent years that we've gone a little bit astray, if I may say so. And yeah, I feel we've gone a little bit astray, and I feel that there are a number of areas where that's evident, and that I think that really those in outreach, and I wouldn't necessarily put myself in that role nowadays. I'm trying to train people who might go into outreach, but I don't have an active role in outreach per se for the past 3 or 4 years, even though I did for the previous 30 years. I would say firstly that we need to look at the people who are engaging in the outreach process, and I think that the people that we want to choose to do that. I took my rabbis recently to a mosque, and we met with a sheikh, and this sheikh is somebody who you would say is in outreach, Muslim outreach. That's kind of what he does. Given his explanation of how he spends his time, that's exactly what he's doing. And this guy was a real human being. This guy was the real deal. This guy was humble. This guy was modest. This guy was wise. This guy was deep. He was genuine. You felt he was human as well. You felt he was a role model as a person. And it really made me feel like it's a shame that a lot more of our outreach rabbis couldn't be like that. He wasn't charismatic. He wasn't magnetic. He didn't have necessarily a wonderful personality and sense of humor. But to me, those aren't the things that matter. I think sometimes in outreach, that's what the focus is. That's what the superstars are. The superstars are the people with the charisma and the energy and the enthusiasm and the excitement and the intelligence and the genius and the brilliance and the who knows what. But to me, those are all superficial qualities. I think if we want to attract a younger generation of Jews to Judaism, I think we will attract them ultimately through role models. I think they want to see authenticity. I think they want to see a realness in human beings. And I think that's what's important. I think we've gone a little bit away from that. That I would say is number one. I would say along similar lines, and it kind of relates to that, is I think a lot of outreach can be about emotional highs, about giving people an exciting, thrilling, emotional experience, but not necessarily something that is sustainable. And I think there's a danger in that. There's a danger in selling them a product that isn't what's going to be the product in 5 years' time or in 10 years' time. I always say that outreach, what's important in outreach, if you want to get people to be engaged Jewishly and become more religious, it's much more important what they're doing in 50 years' time than what they're doing in 6 months' time. This is a long-term deal, long-term commitment.
If I can just pick you up on that briefly, and then you can carry on with your some of the other issues. But just to briefly pick up on this, because I do think about this matter of, emotionally intense experiences that people may experience when they let's say go on a Jewish outreach trip, or whatever it is, event, or a trip to Poland, and I do understand it's not sustainable. It might not be sustainable to make people think that this is this is going to be your Jewish experience the whole time. Of course not. But I don't necessarily think that they don't have a place, because I certainly don't see it necessarily as manipulative, which is what I feel like some other people might try to categorize it as. So, for example, I went on a Poland trip, and there were things that occurred. Me with 50 other Jewish students, standing by one of the train stations where hundreds of thousands of Jews were deported, and singing a song from Psalms, and some of the rabbis and speakers talking, getting very emotional and crying. One person might look at that, so you'd say, well, that's real emotional manipulation to make us feel these deep things. But I feel it's being real. Like this was incredibly. It was one of the greatest tragedies of all time, what happened in Poland. And as someone that studied history, I would sometimes say to people, let's say there are two people. One person hears on the news, or is told by secondhand, that there was a child that was run over by someone on the road, God forbid, and they read it and they're like, oh God, it's terrible, whatever. And then there's another person who's a first-hand witness. Now, they saw it actually happen, they saw everyone screaming and crying, and they are way more emotional about it. But who had the more objective or clear understanding of what occurred? Let's say, in terms of documenting what happened, the second person. But they're more emotional because that's a natural human response. So I don't always feel it is a manipulative thing. I know that's a slightly side point, but I wanted just to get your thoughts on that, because I do often hear this brought up as an issue.
Yeah, I think it's a fine line, and I think it's you have to be very careful when walking that line. And I don't know that people are careful with it. I don't know that people realize that it doesn't take much to step over that line for it to become something that's manipulative. If you talk about Poland in particular, I someone can argue with me this and tell me they did one earlier, but I think I ran possibly the first outreach trip to Poland in 1995, I think it was, almost 30 years ago. And I was running trips to Poland when nobody else was. And I reflected back on what I was doing, and I took a very different approach. And here's what I think might be the difference, but I'm happy to, there's more to it than we can discuss in just a kind of a 2-minute conversation. I think the question is, are you putting people in a position, having a conversation with them, and then letting them feel what they feel, which might actually be nothing, or are you pushing the feeling on them? Or are you trying to get them to feel something? Do you have a destination that you're going to, and you're really trying to push them there? And I learned something from kind of my first trip to Poland. I recall, I went to Poland for the first time in 1987 when I was 21. And at that time, I was studying at Aish Torah in Jerusalem, and I just had this deep-seated need to go and experience the camps. And Poland was communist in those days. It was not at all easy to go there. And I went around the yeshiva to get somebody to come with me. There wasn't a single person out of 120 people that was willing to come with me. They all said, why would you want to do that? It's ridiculous. Why would you want to bother? I went and asked friends, I asked family, that couldn't get anybody to come with me to Poland. So I went on my own, and that trip is kind of an interesting experience in and of itself. And anyway, I remember going to Birkenau. And if you go to Birkenau nowadays, I mean, you say you've been, so you probably know what it's like. That you'll meet hundreds, if not thousands of people there, and lots of Israeli groups with all the flags, the Israeli flags draped around them. It's a very, very, very busy place, Birkenau nowadays. When I went, I was the only person there. I was one person in this giant camp. And I remember going in there on my own, lying down in the middle of one of the fields there, and I just cried for about 45 minutes. I just cried and cried and cried. And it was such a powerful experience for me. It was so meaningful for me. When I took my first group, that was 8 years later now. So I had maybe 20 young Jews, and we got the bus to Birkenau, and I prepared them, and I said, look, we're going to this place now, and this is a very powerful place and very meaningful in Jewish history, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I said, get off the bus and go there, and I'm just going to prepare some stuff. And I was getting out some candles and a chauffeur and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they all went. And I get there, and they're all standing there in front of the gates, the gates where the train goes through, and taking pictures of themselves, selfies, oh, let me get a picture here, let me get a picture of this. And I was like, I was angry. I was actually angry. I was like, how can you do that? This is blasphemous. This is utter and gross disrespect for what happened over here. And it took me a while, you grow older and you learn and you see more. It took me a while to realize that that's very judgmental of me. People need to go through their own experiences. People need to take things in their own way. People need to have an experience in the way that's appropriate for them, and the process needs to be their own process. And so I've done lots of Poland trips. I've done 40 or so Poland trips over my time. I would never want to try and get somebody to feel something. I would hope that the soul inside of them feels something. I would hope that the narrative that they hear, I would hope that what they're seeing with their own eyes would move them. But if it doesn't, it's not my job to make that happen. And I think that's when you get to you border on manipulation, when you have an emotional destination that you want someone to get to, and you push them towards it.
Well, but
I think it's subtle and it's nuanced.
We were just talking about davening and creating, services that help people connect more. So why is that an issue here? If you're, doing things like, where do you draw the line with emotional manipulation? Like, for example, students all, singing a song that quotes Psalms that are something, that's emotional experience. Is that manipulative? To me, it just it creates an avenue for connection.
This is a broader issue than we have time for in this particular, discussion. Happy to just do something on that alone. But I think it's subtle and it's nuanced, and I don't think that I can just, answer those questions. I think I need to say a lot more about what I see is education, what I see the difference between education and manipulation is. And I do have a very strong and thought through perspective on that. But I don't think I can just kind of throw it out there. I would want to do it justice if we were going to discuss it properly, and I wouldn't, I don't feel it's the time or place to do that.
Sure. It sounds like what the key thing, though, that you consider manipulative is when you're trying to get someone to a particular destination.
Yeah, that's right. An emotional destination, yeah, or a destination in the way they are, in the way they live their life. I feel both of those, I would say, are agenda driven. I think you've got to be very careful. And that was the next thing I was going to say, actually, is you have to be very careful not to have an agenda. I think if you're not careful in outreach, you can get a holier than thou attitude of us and them, of I am the person who knows everything. I'm the all-knowing, who has my head screwed on straight and has my life going in the right direction. And everybody else is just lost souls who haven't got a clue. And who just don't know what's going on.
From versus not from.
Yeah, well, basically, you can encapsulate it in that, exactly. And to me, it comes down to, and you'll often hear people say this, I'll ask somebody, are you from? And they'll say to me, it depends on what you mean by from. And I think that's really important. What does being from mean? What does being Torah observant Jew mean? You can't tell me it's somebody who's keeping all the mitzvot, because nobody keeps all the mitzvot. They're not. We're all human. We're all going to make our mistakes. We're all going to have the things that we get tripped up in. So nobody's doing them all. We're all going to have moments. Pardon?
I am.
There you go. Other than you, Ollie. We're all gonna have our moments where we get angry when the Torah says don't get angry, where we speak Lashon Hara when the Torah says don't speak Lashon Hara, where we wake up late when the Torah says no, you got to be at the minyan in the right time, whatever it might be. So we all come a cropper with these things. So what does it mean to be from? And for a person to have this little box. I recall there have been outreach organizations that I've been involved with in the past. They have a definition. What's our goal? Shabbos, family purity, and kashrus. That's what we're trying to do. Trying to get someone to do those three things. Now, number one, those are all quite superficial things, and you'll tell me, well, you can't judge other than through superficial things. Number two, they're all between man and God. That's true, and what Judaism doesn't have anything to do with other human beings. And number three, it's a very narrow definition. It's a very narrow definition, and it's not an individual definition. It's a definition. It's a broad definition. There's no personalization in there. There's no, well, what if somebody really relates to the mitzvah of tzitzis and doesn't really connect to Shabbos at this point in their development, at this point in their growth, at this point in their engagement in Judaism? No. Shabbos is what they've got to do, not tzitzis. Forget your tzitzis. Do Shabbos.
I'll tell you what I find one of the most disturbing things, which is commonplace. And again, I always have to caveat this by saying I'm hugely in favour of Jewish outreach when it's done the right way. But we need to address with the issues, and we mustn't just push things under the carpet. And one of the things that I see happening that is disturbing is where you'll have people involved in outreach, and they will draw someone in, inspire them, and then once that person has become a certain level of observance, they stop investing the time. They don't have time for them anymore, and they'll tell you're on your own now. They say, well, it's the responsibility of the observant world and you've got to figure out your own thing. And it's sort of what ends up happening is the relationship is that is somewhat manipulative. It's because it's treating someone as a means to an end.
Yeah.
For my spreadsheet or for my that one more person is Shomrei Shabbos, whatever. It makes the relationship unhealthy, and I know people, and I can speak from personal experience, where you can end up feeling a bit abandoned.
Yeah. This is a crass and highly inappropriate parallel, but it's what comes to me. So I'll say it because it comes to me. It's like on the wagons on the way to the camps, they would write the numbers of the people in the wagon. There's 121 people in this wagon, and you want to count them when they come out, make sure there's 121, nobody escaped. It's like, it's numbers. It's just a numbers game, and Judaism has never been a numbers game. It really hasn't, and I think it's highly, highly inappropriate that we turn ourselves into a numbers game, and it's really not what it's about. And I would say more than that. I would say, there's a famous thing that I love when you look historically, but Beryl Wine really I don't know if you know Rabbi Beryl Wine, but a historian. He really encapsulated this very beautifully. He said that that when at the time of Abraham, Judaism was an inch wide, only an inch wide, but it was a mile deep. The roots were a mile deep. He says at the time of the Enlightenment, Judaism was a mile wide, but it was only an inch deep. And the whole thing fell apart. The whole thing collapsed with the Enlightenment. It's not numbers. It's not superficiality. It's not how many kosher restaurants there are. It's not how many shuls there are in an area. And it comes back to the prayer thing. It's the quality of engagement. It's the feeling. It's the relationship with God. It's the meaning that people find in it. It's the commitment they have. It's the genuineness. It's the authenticity. Coming back kind of full circle to what I said at the beginning. And I think that's what we should be looking for. And to me, if you can engage a very small number of people and really engage in a focused, meaningful, human way, and get people to engage and go on a journey together, and you take them through a very healthy process of outreach, a very individualistic outreach of process of outreach, but you only get 5 or 6 people as opposed to the 500 people that you want coming to the classes. I feel that it's quite possible in my mind. I don't want to state it as an absolute black and white, but that is a much more meaningful thing to do. That's a much more meaningful way of going about doing it.
Well, as I heard the Lubavitcher Rebbe once say when he was asked, someone reached out saying, I'm doing this class on mothers and have a big community, and only three people showed up, and I'm so disappointed. And he said Moses only had one mother. So I agree. We have to stop thinking about numbers, and also what does it mean that just someone going to one talk or one trip, even if you don't see anything externally, it may have made a huge impression on them in ways you can never know. And the other thing I find that is so interesting, I've had a shift in terms of, the Chabad groups will do mivsoyim, where they'll go and offer tefillin, or for men to do, or for Shabbat candles they hand out to Jewish women. And I used to think, what does this achieve long term? Someone that's not really connected there, they put on tefillin and they go, and they don't take their numbers down, they don't take their details, there's no sign up and let's take them on a journey. And I realized this is actually a very healthy kind of way of doing things, because it's not about treating someone as a means to an end. It's saying, you're a Jew, I'm a Jew, be Jewish, do Jewishness just like I do it, and I'm not trying to take you anywhere. I'm just take responsibility for your Judaism, and that's it. And I think that's the approach. So what do you think is the key mantra or theme that needs to be at the forefront of people's minds whenever they are engaged in Jewish outreach?
Authenticity, humility, and love. Those are the things that occur to me. And I think if you have those 3 things, you won't go wrong. I think you'll figure out what to do. If what you're doing is based on those 3 things, then I think what will come out will be good. I don't know the details of how it will come out, but I think it'll come out right.